On her wedding day, Laura Seymour was left alone on the church steps, without a call, without an answer, and with her future torn away. It later came to light that her fiancé Brent hadn't just run. He had deliberately taken her life savings and disappeared without remorse. But fate stepped in, not with rescue, but with a quiet ally who helped her reclaim her voice and fight back. And just wait until you hear the powerful twist that turned this betrayal into a moment of justice no one saw coming. It was supposed to be the happiest day of her life. The sky was clear. The guests were seated. The church bells had been tested 3 times that morning. And yet, Laura Seymour stood alone on the front steps of a little country church, holding a bouquet that no longer made sense. Brent, the man she had moved across states for, the man she trusted, didn't show up. No call, no message, no sign of trouble, just silence. The guests slowly left, trying not to stare. Her mother said, "Maybe it's nerves," but Laura knew better. Deep down, she knew the truth the moment she saw the empty road. She'd been left. 2 hours later, still in her dress, she sat alone on the church steps, not crying, just still. That's when a truck pulled up, old, dusty, quiet, driven by a man who didn't look like he was there for a wedding. Jack Maddox, rancher, a man of few words and steady hands. He saw her, the white dress, the broken moment. He didn't ask questions, just tipped his hat and said, "You don't look like you should be sitting here alone." She looked at him, eyes tired. "He left me." Jack nodded once, no shock, no judgment. "All right, then let's get you out of here." She didn't know his name, didn't ask where they were going, but she stood, climbed into the truck, and drove away from everything she thought her life was meant to be. Not toward a new beginning yet, but at least away from the ruin. Laura didn't plan to stay. When Jack Maddox helped her into his pickup and drove her away from the church, she thought it would be for 1 night, 2 at most, just long enough to catch her breath, sleep without hearing whispers, and figure out what to do next. But something about the ranch, about its quiet, about Jack's presence, made her hesitate to leave. His land stretched wide under the Wyoming sky. Horses grazed in the distance. The wind carried the scent of dry earth and pine. There were no questions, no expectations, just silence and space. She spent the first few days barely speaking. Jack didn't push her. He simply made coffee each morning, left a plate of toast on the table, and went about his work, fixing a gate, feeding the horses, repairing fence posts. And slowly, Laura began to follow. At first, it was little things, sweeping the porch, feeding the dog, then brushing down the horses. One afternoon, without thinking, she planted lavender near the front steps, something to make it feel lived in. Time passed differently out here, slower, gentler. And yet, the hurt didn't vanish. Some nights, she still woke with the image of the church in her mind, still wondered what she'd done wrong, still caught herself reaching for a phone that no longer held his name. But little by little, the questions faded. Not because she found all the answers, she hadn't, but because she stopped needing them. Jack wasn't talkative, but he was steady. He worked hard, listened well, and never made her feel like a burden. He didn't try to rescue her. He didn't fill the silence with empty words, and somehow that made her stronger. Then one day, 5 months after the wedding that never happened, a silver car pulled up the dirt road, shiny, out of place, and achingly familiar. It was Brent. He stepped out of the car as if nothing had changed. Same polished shoes, same calm voice. But this time, Laura saw what she hadn't seen before. He wasn't there to apologize. He was there to collect. "You and I need to talk," he said. "About the money." She didn't understand at first. Then she remembered. The shared bank account, the one he'd insisted they open before the wedding. The one where she'd transferred most of her savings, money she had worked for, saved for her dream of opening a salon. "You used it?" she asked, voice low. "I invested it. You weren't complaining when we were planning a future. Don't act like it wasn't for both of us." He spoke with that same calm certainty that once convinced her to move states, to believe in him. But now it felt different, hollow. "You took my money and disappeared," she said. He didn't deny it. Jack had been standing near the barn when Brent arrived, watching, listening, not interfering. When Brent finally turned to go, tossing out a warning about lawyers and being reasonable, Jack approached quietly and asked, "You want me to handle it?" Laura shook her head. "No, I have to do this myself." That night, she didn't cry. She opened her laptop, pulled out old bank statements, emails, message threads. For the first time in months, she felt something other than sadness. She felt fire. Brent hadn't just broken her heart. He had planned this, coldly, carefully, and she wasn't going to let it go. Not this time. She was no longer the woman sitting on the church steps. She was someone rebuilding, one step at a time, and now she was ready to fight. Laura had never stepped into a courtroom before, not as a witness, not as a plaintiff, and definitely not as someone demanding justice. But that's where she found herself now, sitting upright in a quiet, cold courtroom in downtown Cody, with papers in her hands and her past in front of her. Brent was there too. He looked exactly the same, clean-shaven, tailored jacket, confident posture. But now she saw what was behind the calm expression, a man who believed he'd already won. He had a lawyer. She had truth. And Jack? He sat in the very back row, not saying a word, not trying to control the outcome, just being there, present, solid, like the land he worked every day. The case, on paper, was about money. Brent claimed the funds were shared, that she had gifted them for their future together. But Laura had records, transfers, screenshots, messages where he called it her money, where he promised it would remain untouched until after the wedding. She had her old friend Melissa testify, the one who helped Laura move out to Wyoming, the one who'd warned her not to rush. Even with the evidence, Brent's legal team tried to twist the story. They said she was emotional, impulsive, that she had abandoned the relationship when she refused to speak to him after the wedding. They painted her as bitter, disappointed, acting out of spite. Laura didn't argue. When it was her turn to speak, she stood slowly, looked at the judge, and said, "This isn't about heartbreak, it's about trust. I didn't give him that money to disappear with. I gave it because I believed in something we built together. What he did wasn't just cruel, it was calculated. I'm not here to win something back, I'm here to make it right." For a moment, the room was silent. Even Brent looked away. The judge listened, carefully, quietly, and after hours of testimony, she heard the words that changed everything. The court finds in favor of the plaintiff. Laura had won. It wasn't just the money. It was the truth, finally said out loud with the world watching. It was the moment she stood in a place where she could have felt powerless, and didn't. Outside the courthouse, she didn't smile for the cameras. She didn't speak to the reporters. But she did glance over her shoulder, toward Jack, who walked out just a few steps behind her. He didn't say anything either. He just looked at her the way you do when someone's come through a storm, and stayed standing. That night, back at the ranch, Laura sat by the window as the sun set behind the hills. She didn't feel victorious. She felt free. There was no celebration, no champagne, just peace. The quiet kind that doesn't come from someone saving you, but from saving yourself. And that kind of peace, it lasts. Almost a year had passed since Laura sat alone on the church steps, waiting for a future that never came. Now she stood in front of her own small salon in Cody, Wyoming. The sign above the door read, "Sagebrush Dreams." The name wasn't random, it was personal, a quiet tribute to how far she'd come. The space was modest, soft light, earthy colors. Nothing too polished, but it felt alive. She'd painted the walls herself, planted sage and lavender on the windowsill. The first clients came out of curiosity. The next came by word of mouth. And soon, Laura wasn't just cutting hair. She was helping people feel like themselves again. Jack was still part of her life, always steady, never in the way. He didn't say much about the past. He didn't try to rewrite it. He simply stood beside her in the present, helping, waiting, showing up without needing thanks. Their bond grew slowly, not from grand gestures, but from quiet habits. Coffee left at the door, shared silences, a truck waiting outside when her work ran late. On the anniversary of the day she was left behind, Jack came to the salon after closing. He wore his usual flannel shirt and held a small box in his hand. "I'm not here to rescue you," he said, "just offering the next chapter. If you want it, Laura smiled. Yes, she answered. Not because she needed someone, but because now she could choose someone freely. They married on the ranch. Simple, barefoot, surrounded by the wind, the hills, and people who truly mattered. Later that evening, Laura asked, "Why did you stop that day?" Jack looked at her, calm as ever. "You looked like someone worth believing in." She nodded. "I just needed time to believe in myself too." And she had. No dramatic ending, no fairy tale, just something honest, something lasting, a real beginning.